Okay. It's August 16th, and this is the Operations Committee. Going to get a roll call, please.
Director Matt Sampson,
Here.
Director Monty Schmidt,
Here.
and Chair Larry Russell.
Here. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
and Chair Russell.
Aye. Public comment on non-agenda matters.
There are none.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the operations meeting from July 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Staff update and award a professional services agreement with Carollo Engineers for engineering design services in support of the Fairfax Manor First Pump Station Reconstruction Project.
I'm just wanted a quick moment here to share my feelings on this project and what's gone on so far. You'll get the full story, and you've heard a bit of it. It really is a good news story, but well beyond that, to me, it's just an incredible illustration of what we have in this district and our staff, and how the response to this emergency was handled, and how through successive efforts, concerns of the surrounding community were addressed. And it was really one of the most impressive kind of mobilization efforts really that I've seen. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that, and I look forward to the presentation.
Okay, good morning, board members. Mark Hazray, engineering. I'm here joined with Ben Bauer. He's our superintendent of operations, mechanical, electrical, and corrosion. We are presenting an update on the incident that occurred at the Fairfax Manor pump station, as well as making a recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement for design of the permanent replacement facility. So I'll let Ben provide the presentation.
Good morning. I'll update you on the Fairfax Manor First Lift Pump. I'll describe the damage that occurred after a construction accident, the impact to the water system, staff response, and ongoing improvement since the accident. The day before Memorial Day weekend, Friday, May 24th, the Fairfax Manor First Pump Station was destroyed when a wooden retaining wall collapsed under the weight of an asphalt grinder during a paving operation. A contractor working for PG&E installing a gas main on Tamalpais Road and Berry Trail was preparing to pave by grinding the trench line when the accident occurred. The grinder tipped onto and rested on the pump station. It racked the building and knocked it off its foundation. A power pole was also involved in the accident, which disabled power to the facility, and the pump station became inoperable and inaccessible, and staff isolated the pump from the system. Fairfax Manor First Lift is a key facility. It sources water to 3 tanks: Bay Road Tank, Fairfax Manor First Lift Tank, and Fairfax Manor Top Tank. Those tanks serve 261 services and 35 fire hydrants. If you're not familiar with the Fairfax Manor system, downtown Fairfax is on the lower right of your screen. This is essentially the hill behind Fairfax Lumber. In response, staff immediately identified and secured a secondary pump location near 131 Scenic Road. This site was selected because the 2 water mains, which supply the suction and discharge side for the pump, were running parallel in the street. A hydrant to be used for the discharge piping was pre-existing, and the suction piping and hydrant on the lower system was installed the day after the accident on May 25th. Staff deployed a portable pump on Sunday, May 26th to begin pumping. The original pump that was used was owned by Contra Costa Water. Just days before the accident occurred, the Marin Water District owned portable pump was returned by a vendor after being reconditioned to meet emission standards. And until the Bay Area Air Quality Management District was contacted to give permission to use that pump, Contra Costa pump was used. What's pictured here is the Marin Water District owned pump. Both pumps required staffing to start and stop the pump and monitor the operation, and that was scheduled through July 30th. With the exception of a planned shutdown to install suction piping, there were no interruptions of water service. Staff recognized that the portable pump was a short-term solution and looked for ways to reduce the impact to the neighborhood. The initial mitigation efforts included installing perimeter fencing and installation around the portable pump to reduce noise and secure the area. The decibel level recorded at a nearby property line without insulation was 57.9 decibels. With the insulation, it was reduced to 48 decibels, about 17% reduction. To give you an idea of the comparison, a normal conversation is about 60 decibels. A car driving by is about 70 decibels. Staff considered ways to improve the condition further and ultimately constructed a water pump station inside a 10 by 8 shipping container, seen here. Staff arranged site work to level the road to accept the container and the associated generator. The portable pump was removed and the container facility deployed on July 31st and powered by that external stationary generator. The stationary generator was more quiet than the portable pump. The decibel level at that same property line was 35 decibels, which is a 39.5% reduction from the uninsulated portable pump. The storage container is secure and insulated. It's resilient and reliable. And most notably, it's remote capable and controlled by SCADA. Single phase power was the only power available at the alternate site. Single phase is typically residential use, and the electric motor powering the pump requires 3-phase. As such, the staff sourced a variable frequency drive, which in addition to controlling the speed and torque of the motor, will also convert single phase to 3-phase to operate the pump with the available single phase electricity. Because of this, staff was able to work with PG&E to provide service. Service was installed on August 12th, and staff anticipates to switch over from generator power to PG&E power by the end of the month. Once transferred, PG&E service will eliminate fumes and noise from running a diesel power generator, and the stationary generator will remain on site for emergency use. The picture that you see was just taken on Wednesday. So you do see the container on the pad that was created. A second on the left of that is the stationary generator on its own asphalt pad. It's surrounded by the temporary fencing and the insulation. You see the drop from PG&E on the weatherhead, and on the right is the suction discharge hydrant. Water system is at normal operating levels. This is considered a work in progress, and staff will strive to continue to improve the conditions. Some of the things that have been done so far to the area, the fencing and insulation for sound reduction was installed on June 28th. The site work to accept the storage container completed on July 18th. The electric pump and new generator installed on July 31st. The PG&E power service was installed on August 12th. Redwood fencing to replace the insulated chain link is scheduled to be completed on Monday, August 19th, this coming Monday. That will replace the temporary fencing you see to the left of the container in the image surrounding the stationary generator. The new VFD installation is anticipated to be August 30th. The town of Fairfax has been providing support with encroachment and right-of-way. Site of the accident remains isolated, inoperable, and inaccessible due to hazardous conditions. The timber retaining wall replacement by the town of Fairfax is scheduled for October, and engineering is proceeding with the design contract. And with that, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So, as part of the district's response to this incident as well, staff performed a condition assessment of the facility to determine the damage and what a reconstruction effort might look like. Ultimately, we determined that a full reconstruction of the facility is required. Really, this is due to the extent of the damage, the age of the overall facility, and the overall site structural and civil improvements that would be required to ensure the longevity of the facility. Civil improvements also include grading, soil retention systems, and of course, replacement of the pump station itself. And so staff issued a competitive solicitation and identified the condition assessment, the pre-design criteria, as well as an accelerated schedule. We ultimately recommend executing a contract with Carollo Engineers. They proposed a project team with over 40 years of collective experience in the design of pump stations. Their team demonstrated technical abilities as well as their ability to meet an accelerated schedule with their experience on the district's Castania pump station projects and the emergency intertie project. And they also provided a comprehensive proposal with close attention to details of some of the constraints and criteria that we identified. The scope is identified in the staff report, but ultimately there's three key components. There's a pre-design effort that includes topographic and boundary survey, as well as geotechnical reports. The key component, of course, design of the new facility, and engineering services during construction. So our timeline is, as Ben mentioned, starts with Fairfax. They're looking to solicit their construction contract for the retaining wall either this month or early September, and completing the project in October. Our work will take a little bit longer. We've identified a target design phase of approximately 6 months through January 2025. That is accelerated schedule. We identify a bid phase between February and March, with construction beginning April of next year. And that's expected to go through the end of year 2025, so basically the end of next year. So if this contract is approved today, we anticipate a notice to proceed in the coming weeks. The overall design budget is approximately $1.2 million, with a staff recommended contingency of $200,000. For a total estimated budget of about $1.4 million. And so with that, we are recommending to the board to authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Carollo Engineers in an amount not to exceed approximately $1.4 million for design services in support of the reconstruction of the pump station.
I wanted to briefly add that one of the many benefits of the work done by operations that you heard from Ben is that it allows the design of the pump station to, while still somewhat accelerated, to be at a pace that is not an emergency, and we can really design it well and get a good. And the other piece, of course, we are tracking all of our costs, including labor time, and at the right time, Molly will pursue that, and we'll understand how to get reimbursed for all this work. As we progress, you'll probably see that there may be elements that are betterments and maybe not. We'll see how the design goes. For example, and this is somewhat, we do have pump stations like this where, the pump station is kind of buried and there's steps to get down to it. Bringing heavy equipment is a pain. So maybe there'll be a retaining wall we'll put in and level it and that sort of stuff. So more to come on how it progresses, both the design and over the longer term, the reimbursement process.
Questions?
The first part, it's unfortunate this happened, but the work that's being done, especially to make this thing like a more tangible solution as we move forward, is much appreciated. Did that shipping container, is that a prefab type thing now that comes, or is that a design that you guys put together?
It's prefab.
Okay.
It was purchased like you see it. The only the change we made was to paint it.
Gotcha.
Well, to be clear, the container was empty, if that's what you meant.
Right.
And the staff did.
Put it together?
Yeah, put the
Right.
entire thing.
It looks
together.
really good. So nice work. So appreciate it for sure, especially as it's going to be there for a little while.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, the container was empty. It was pieced together to create this facility.
And the only other question I have, how many people bid on the project?
The design project, we did receive one proposal.
Just
we
one?
We solicited to 4 capable consultants that would do good work, and we received one proposal. We did reach out to all of the consultants, inquiring kind of what that was about, and really based on the workloads in the industry and our accelerated schedule, as well as the kind of the complexity of this specific site and the pump station, they identified essentially a go, no-go decision, which led to receiving one proposal.
Great. Thank you. That's it, Larry.
Maybe just following on that line of logic, is that, I mean, it feels like we almost, like half or more of our projects come in this nature, where we have an emergency, we have an accelerated time schedule. I mean, water service doesn't wait. Are there other consultants? Do we need a bigger pool of consultants to be able to go to, knowing that this is often a problem, or is this just indicative of the current economic climate, with how busy all the firms are?
That's an excellent question. I think Director Russell has mentioned this before. There's finite resources. There's finite people, and there's a lot of work available. This is actually a good nexus to our next item C, which we'll discuss with regards to our geotechnical contract. But we ensure competitive solicitations, we build relationships, and we identify as feasible projects as possible. And it's really, I think, just the nature of kind of our industry at the moment.
Okay, and people who work in the region. Similarly on the build out of the container, that was impressive, and I'm sure that the people who live around the pump station really appreciate the sound qualities, and among other things. That strikes me as an asset that the district can retain, and will, it seems again like we unfortunately do have these emergency needs every so often, and so that might be another benefit. And Molly, I'm glad to hear that you're tracking all the costs associated with this, and it's unfortunate, and we want to get the fair amount of reimbursement back. So anyway, great project. I really am sure that the people who live around the pump station really appreciate it.
Yeah. Director Cush, who's not here today, would certainly express, because he was somewhat on point with the complaints coming in and concerns from the city, but the largely on our end addressed, I think, in an impressive way to the community. And to get PG&E to put in service as quick as what occurred, again, just speaks to the overall leadership and coordination and constant communication that's been going on. So, yeah, really.
Might also speak to the fact that they're involved with the accident.
We did mention that, too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they knew.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about the only one response. Is it that Carollo's workload's lighter? I mean, that's one interpretation.
What I'm hearing out there is there's a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work, and some of that is actually coming right from the Infrastructure Act and other things that really pumped money into these capital investments broadly. And what I'm hearing is consultants are no longer, that when they're this busy, they don't fish. They're only going to go to projects that they hear about or know about, or something like this. It seems they may talk. Okay, who has capacity to take this on? Because, right, as you know.
Oh, I don't think they talk, Ben.
Is what I'm hearing a little bit.
I'd be very surprised because collusion is a big problem.
Right. This isn't a low bid process, so I think it opens it up more than, right, contractors, that would be illegal. But I think there's a
But it would have
sense-
been a low bid with multiple bids, right? Probably.
Well, no, right? This is professional services.
Sure,
So it's not
but-
a low bid decision.
Right, but price obviously has an impact on the decision. I'm a little shocked, very frankly, at the magnitude of the contract. I didn't. What is the estimated cost of the new pump station?
It's a good question, and at this stage, our cost estimate is probably a confidence level of
Whatever.
approximately 10 to 30%. I would say north of $2 to $2.5 million.
So 50% for engineering fees.
Yes, but when you break down the cost, the design component actually represents much less than 50%. It's roughly about $700,000. There's a number of ways to contract for this work. Oftentimes, we'll contract separately for surveying, for boundary survey, for geotechnical analysis. That's done under this contract to streamline the process. Additionally, we often amend our contracts. As you're aware, we come back to the board with engineering services during construction, during bidding, and that extends the cost of the contract. This is all done on the forefront, which has led to the 1.2, but the design portion of that is roughly 700.
Where I'm headed is, I think the district should expect substantial pushback from PG&E and an insurance company, because I think you're going to hear what I'm saying in spades when it comes to the dollars. I don't see a way around the upgrade issue or the betterment. So be prepared, because I had envisioned a pump station more in the magnitude of the cost of this contract. Okay, 1.42 million, whatever. Those are similar numbers. So I just was like, whoa, that's a chunk of change.
Sure.
So I guarantee you the other side is going to push back on this. And I don't know what our plan is about that, but you will remember my words, I'm sure, because you're going to hear them again from someone else, I believe. It's going back in the same spot.
Correct.
And where exactly is it now from where it was? It's like around the corner or something?
Ben could probably speak to that better, but I want to say it's off Scenic Drive and Tamalpais. Is that right?
It's about a quarter mile away.
Oh, it's a ways.
A ways, yes.
Okay. When do you think we'll be back in full operation with the final version?
The full operation of the permanent facility, I would say, start up early 2026. We expect construction completion, contract completion by end of year. Now that's an accelerated schedule. That includes.
He answered the question.
Yeah, I would say start of 2026.
Has Fairfax got involved yet? I mean, is this retaining wall faulty, or is it just the machine exceeded the weight?
So we are in close coordination with Fairfax from an engineering capacity. The WordGen grinder that destroyed our facility effectively weighs north of 50,000 pounds.
Sure.
And an engineering analysis would identify that the retaining wall had reached its useful service life. It was a wooden lagging retaining wall that was rotted and could not simply bear the weight of the grinder. As far as our design project, we are in close coordination with the town of Fairfax for encroachments, as well as their project, their retaining wall.
How'd they get it out of there?
They used, I believe, two large tow trucks
Oh, interesting.
with guy lines, like several guy lines. It was a very coordinated
Clever.
effort.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that thing is pretty heavy.
Oh yeah.
It get totaled?
It's a good question. It didn't look totaled, I'm sure, and they're north of $1 million, so I think they're looking to probably repair it.
Interesting. Okay, public comment?
There are none.
Okay. All righty. Can I get a motion to move it to the board?
I'm going to point out actually that we're requesting board approval of this item, and unique
Okay.
from our normal process, just because of the urgency of trying to get the design underway.
Okay.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we have the same dream team, so have at it, Mark.
Okay, thank you, members of the board. Mark Casray, Engineering. So item C before you is a recommendation to review and refer to a future scheduled board meeting the award of 2 professional services agreements with separate on-call geotechnical engineering and materials testing firms. So every few years, the district solicits competitive proposals for as-needed geotechnical engineering and various materials testing services. Materials density testing is what's typically performed under this contract. It's performed on all underground projects, whether it's operations or capital improvement projects. And the purpose of it is to ensure that our trench meets compaction requirements imposed by the district and the jurisdictions having authority, ensuring ultimately that our trenches don't fail over time. So, kind of speaking to that consultant pool that we're talking about, that pool of finite resources, as the district CIP grows, so too have we noticed our needs for support services, contractors, consultants. And so we identified an opportunity to ensure that we have this third-party support as we continue to grow our CIP by proposing 2 separate on-call contracts with capable geotechnical firms. And so under each of these contracts, they're identical. The consultant will perform various compaction density testing and various miscellaneous materials testing, concrete, as well as geotechnical services during construction and design. Each contract would include a base contract period of 2 years, completing in June of 2026, and may be extended by contract amendment under a not-to-exceed contract price of $500,000 each, for a total not-to-exceed limit of $1 million. It is important to note, though, that these contracts are managed through a blanket purchase order. The work under these contracts is already budgeted in our adopted CIP in our operational budget. And so as this need is identified on various projects, the funding is directly proportioned from the work that's already occurred. And so with that, we do recommend to the board to review and refer to a regularly scheduled board meeting, professional services agreements with 2 firms for on-call geotechnical services in an amount not to exceed $500,000 for each contract.
Questions?
No questions.
Why 2 firms?
So we've noticed an accelerated expenditure on our geotechnical contract. And we've also noticed an impact, as we said, to these third parties. Case in point is with our existing geotechnical firm, they sometimes are asking us to delay our call-outs for the compaction testing. And they're also sometimes utilizing third parties themselves because they don't have the staff available to respond to our requests for testing. And so, they don't just work for us. They work for the county. They work for the cities. They work all over various places. And so they themselves actually identified the value in not putting all our eggs in one basket, building these contracts with multiple firms so that we have that flexibility when we need it to continue driving our program.
How do we decide which firm, which contract?
It's a great question. So we have experience with a number of firms. We have a pool of capable, competent firms that are local to our area, and we solicited to 3 of those firms as part of this effort. And we selected 2 that we know have good performance, that have experience with the district, and that are local, so they can respond quickly.
The state of California has basically switched from 2-year contracts to 3-year contracts. I think that's something we should consider to avoid the hassle on all parties of the bidding process. So it's their primary goal, I believe, in the state is to expedite their own paper processing. But it's I think become kind of the standard of the industry, just FYI. So I think we should give some thought to that, perhaps even in this contract. We had Miller Pacific 2 years, and then you extended 2 years. So, it's in that same range.
Mm-hmm.
Something to think about. Okay. Public comment?
There are none.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay, Mr. Cellier, you're up.
Chair Russell, I'm going to announce that I'm going to, in keeping with my practice of recusing myself from matters related to the Russian River water delivery system, I'm going to step away.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for coming.
Yep. Till next time.
Good morning. Happy Friday. Really interesting work by operations, sort of scrambling to keep that pump station going. It's good. This morning I have an update.
I like the part especially about getting it automated
Yeah,
to get it off of the manual.
yeah, and that little container that's a good solution because we're going to be there for it sounds like another year and a bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not as easy to move as you might think. They're easy to put down. We build treatment plants and containers. They're easy to put down. They're not so easy to pick up. So
Yeah,
they're very awkward. And once you load them up, it's not even clear that the guys who deliver them can pick them up. So they do have limitations.
yeah. Working for us until the end of 25 or so. So today we're going to whiz through kind of an update on the conveyance project, which is the winter water from Sonoma to storage in a Marin reservoir. And it's really, there's nothing earth-shattering about the update, but it is, we keep talking about how there's work that's going on. And so this is just going to give us a little bit of insight into the work that the team's been doing. And when we say things like we're refining cost, what does that mean? What are they actually doing that allows them to get to that point? So without further ado, there's just a quick update, and then we're going to get into kind of the preliminary costs that we see for the conveyance projects and how that stacks up against the other costs that we've been looking at. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps. So just briefly reminding us what our three alternatives are that we've sort of screened down from, I think it was 13 different alternatives. We've got from sort of north to south, from the Cotati tanks to Sulahuli Reservoir is referred to as the Cotati 3 project. From PETA 4 on this map, which is essentially from San Antonio Road, sort of down the back roads to Sulahuli. And then the PETA 3 project, which comes off a sort of San Marin Drive area and goes out past Stafford and into Sulahuli. So shown here, the team's drawn up, the map above, of course, showing that we're going to need a couple of pump stations, and the sort of profile below shows us why. So the freeway is sort of all the way over on the right of this graph here on the bottom section, and as you move up that red line, you'll notice pump station number 1 proposed, and then there's a secondary pump station there. Because we got to get over that high point at 510 feet. So there's quite a bit of climb. We're essentially pretty close to sea level where the pipe is by the freeway. If you remember, PETA 3 was one that we talked about being very phasable, and we thought we had a first phase, which is represented with this red section here, going from approximately the end of the distribution system from North Marin at Stafford Lake area out to Sulahuli. But we've had discussions with North Marin about their capability of that distribution system, and I guess it's not terribly surprising to find that it wasn't really designed with the sort of flows that we had in mind. So we think that it's really not designed to support that usage, and we're to get a meaningful, project out of this, we're going to need to build phases 1 and 2. So in this map, the red and the purple pipe would need to be constructed.
They're concerned about velocities or pressures or...
It's sort of a mixed bag of everything, including there's a couple of tanks out there that get isolated, and even when they use it, they've got trouble making sure that water stays in good quality. So if we were to try to use it for our purposes, those tanks would essentially be stranded. and they got some concerns about that. So as we looked at, and we've done this, so this, we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive on this PETA 3 project, and we're not going to repeat that similar information for PETA 4 and Cotati 3, but just to give you an idea and some detail on PETA 3, and then sort of summarized for the other two. So how did we determine the yield on these projects, or what's available flow in the pipeline? So we started looking at the demands of the different customers on this line. And as you can see, the capacity of the North Marin Aqueduct is about 23 million gallons a day. And then depending what everybody typically takes. And remember, this is a wintertime project, so these are wintertime typical flows through that pipeline. And in this case, you know, the PETA 3 looks like if we build it all the way back to the aqueduct, it'll be about 10.4 million gallons a day. The Carollo team is, of course, doing all of this analysis, and what we're looking at here, they take a look at the hydraulic profile. So shown in kind of that salmon background color is really where you want to stay in if you want to keep your pipe materials and so on in the normal range of, or class as we call them. So once you exceed about 250 pounds pressure, you start going up in material class, and things get a little bit special, and that's okay. You can do it. It's just you have to kind of go in with your eyes open. So here, you know, this single pump system, so if we were only trying to put one pump in, you're kind of pushing that hydrograph. If you want, while we plan for 10.4, that might be an average. So there may be occasions where we might want to be able to take 15. And so that higher blue line is what's represented, where it just pokes out above that salmon background. Would be where that high flow is. So you'd be, if we went with one pump station, we could do it, it looks like, but we're kind of on the bubble for materials.
Did they look at just increasing the pipeline diameter?
Yeah, we have, and it's possible, more possible with this 2 pump station version. You could kind of play with that in the first section and use a small pipeline diameter for that first section. So that is one thing that they're looking at.
I was actually looking at the exact opposite. If you made the pipe bigger, you'd reduce the inline friction,
all
which
the way
would
out,
drop
yeah.
below, get you back into the salmon color.
You do, yeah, you would.
Paul, quick question. This single pump scenario, that would be for the entire build out of this, is PETA 3 or PETA 4? Sorry, which one?
Yes.
So that would be for
PETA
all
3.
the phases?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So looking at it right now, with this size pipe, we would say 2 pump stations might be a better design. It keeps you in that salmon-colored area and gives you a bit more flexibility.
Although it's really the first curve is the same.
Yeah.
The second pump station, it's above the salmon color as it was in the first pump station.
It's getting there. Yeah, it's right on the edge there.
Yeah, but I mean, that's arbitrary. I don't know. Do you know what the criterion they use to set the salmon?
I think it's 250 PSI.
Yeah, so because I was just in Toronto at the IWA meeting, and Grundfos had a pump there, 1,100 GPM, 300 meters of head. Wow. It was the biggest Grundfos pump I've ever seen. I mean, the thing was 9 feet high, you know, had this 150 horsepower Siemens motor on it. And it's a typical, you know, the vertical stack. Mm-hmm. And so there's pumps are changing, you know. I mean, that is a dog.
Yeah.
That pump.
And we're going to look hard at the single pump station, obviously, because it's not a project we're running every year, so we're not hugely concerned with energy, right? If you're only going to run this every 7th year or every 5th year or whatever the drought interval happens to be, your energy costs, it's not like it's an everyday pump station use.
No way to modify Castagna to do that job?
No, I don't believe so. Of course, if you're going to have a pump station, you need somewhere to put it. In this case, this is just a quick sort of map grab and satellite photograph showing you the proximity to the freeway. It looks like there's plenty of room there. We might, you know, need to do some persuasion of neighbors, but there's a sort of an empty parking lot there. Maybe it's earmarked for future uses. We don't know. It's something we'll need to figure out. And
I think something you said earlier that Mark said about going underground, or maybe Ben said it about stepping down to the pump station. I think that has a lot of merit here. Zero
Right.
surface profile.
Potential.
something to keep in mind. So you could take the parking lot, restore it to the parking lot,
Right.
and there might be a door over on the side or something, but
Right.
that's it.
Right, something to look at. And then the second pump station, at the first pump station, likely you'd have some kind of cut head tank to separate you from the North Marin Aqueduct. But in this second pump station scenario near Stafford Lake, you wouldn't. It would just be a smaller pump station. The team's looking at all of the routes in this level of detail, so that they're mapping the route, looking at the geotech conditions in all three of the routes. There's really no showstoppers here, but just to give you an example of the level of detail that they're looking at, what helps them provide their confidence in their cost estimates. We wanted to take a look at, again, and with all of the examples, is there a way to reduce, we've heard from our own experience, and we know, and we've heard otherwise, that paving costs are a significant contributor to the cost of these projects. So is there a way for us, these are lengthy pipelines, can we put them in the shoulder somewhere and reduce the need for paving? So the team's taken a look at all of the options, and in this first case, we're just showing, here's your typical road section, and obviously the different size pipe, we're showing 30-inch here, but if you went up to 42-inch, the trenching and so on gets bigger and wider. So it's not a trivial space that you need in order to put something in the shoulder. You're looking at about 8.5 feet potentially that you need to get access to. And so as the team drives the different road segments, again, this is PETA 3 out along San Marin Drive. You can kind of see there's not a lot of room in those areas around San Marin Drive. And maybe on Nevada Boulevard, there's some areas there on the right-hand side that might be possible. And then as you get further out in the Petaluma Point Reyes Road and Hicks Valley Road, it becomes kind of tight. So the sort of conclusion here is for this option and for most of the options, it's pretty limited in terms of our ability to move the pipeline out of the paved surface.
You don't think it's worth looking at boring?
I mean, maybe in some sections, potentially. And, they haven't gotten into sort of material selection yet either, so as we look at constructability, there's really nothing terribly remarkable about it. There are some narrow sections, obviously going through Novato is crowded utility corridors, and pump station siting, almost regardless of the project, is always a challenge. As I mentioned earlier, we've talked about this option in terms of phasing, and it looks like phase 3A and 3B would be required together to provide kind of a reliable yield for the project. So that's the red and the purple section here. If we were to build the whole thing out, so that's, that red and purple and the segment to Nicasio, this is the total sort of preliminary construction cost that we're looking at, with direct costs right around $100 million. And then sort of the contingencies and overhead and profit and escalation and sales tax driving the costs up to pretty near $170 million for this option.
Pretty healthy.
Healthy, for sure. 10.4 MGD, though, if we pump, right, in the wintertime for 4 months, that's going to give you pretty close to 4,000 acre-feet or 3,800 acre-feet of water. And that yield is sort of somewhat restricted by velocity in the North Marin Aqueduct. So if there are segments in that aqueduct that we can increase the diameter in, maybe there's additional yield we can get from this option. And we are looking at that.
Is this thinking about changing Sulhuli, or is this just filling Sulhuli?
Just filling in drought, yeah. It's 16.4 miles in total if we go all the way out to Nicasio as well. Can construct it in phases, though not as much as we thought we could originally. Potentially going out through San Marin Drive, there's some redundancy benefits that North Marin Water District could benefit from. It's another sort of backbone through their system they may be able to utilize. We'll talk to them further about what benefits might be. And again, total cost around $167 million. So jumping to Petaluma 4, this is coming off the San Antonio Road area. And again, you see the hydraulic profile on the bottom of the chart. This time we got to get up over 656 feet at the high point. Essentially, that's going to require 2 pump stations. Again, the geotech analysis that you saw on PETA 3, a very similar approach. There's no fatal flaws here. There's very limited ability to put the piping in the shoulder to help us reduce the costs. Constructability issues are similar to the PETA 3. And this one, you've got to kind of build that whole section from the freeway out along San Antonio Road into Sulahuili before you have any yield. So the only phased part of that construction would be sort of the second phase, where you're going to bypass Petaluma from the Cotati tanks and then increase the size of the Castagna pump station. And when you build those two facilities, the yield for the project jumps up to about 30 million gallons a day. So the phase 4 is the red, going all the way from the freeway essentially to Sulahuili, and that's about 12.5 million, and it'll set you back pretty similar to PETA 3, around $170 million. The second phase, 4B, is shown here in purple that I was just talking about, and that increases your yield up to 30 MGD. Phase 4C would be the yellow section, and that's moving water into Nicasio. And we've kept that in the project description just because it may provide us some benefits down the line. If you were bringing in 30 MGD, you know, you might put some in, right, Sulahuili in its current configuration is only 10,000 acre feet, so you might need 2 lakes if that was the sort of demand that we wanted to bring in. Looking at this in total, it's a pretty healthy direct cost of around $200 million, and when we add in the sort of contingencies, et cetera, it balloons it up to about $340 million. That's, again, for the full build-out, including the leg to Nicasio, at 30 million gallons a day. As you look at that over 4 months of pumping at 30 million, it's 11,000 acre feet per year. So that full build-out, it's a significant quantity of water. What we're looking at as the first phase is that red section, and that's a 12.5 MGD for $170 million. That gets you about 4,600 acre feet per year over that 4-month assumed pumping window.
Yeah, one of the problems, of course, is that we're paying the full rip for potable water, putting it in an open reservoir, having to retreat it, pump it out of there and retreat it. So we're probably up to 2,500 an acre foot, something like that.
So you're saying we can do it? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I
yes,
think
you're right, and we'll get to that. That's it.
Paul, you got the money, honey. I got the time.
That's funny.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah.
So on PETA 3, the leg to Nicasio was 30 million or 31 million,
Yes,
but it goes up significantly. Is that just due to a pipe size?
and I'd have to check on that,
Okay.
Director Sampson, what the differences are there, but likely yes. Phasing, yes. Obviously, they're big phases. Again, North Marin would have some potential future benefits from this option. Okay, so then Cotati 3, this time going from sort of left to right on the hydraulic profile on the bottom. This option goes from Cotati tanks down to Sulahuili Reservoir with a future phase to Nicasio. It's kind of hard to see on my screen, but the sort of purple-pink segment, 2 pump stations, and a pretty healthy lift up over 735 feet to get to Sulahuili Reservoir. Good news is once you're up to that point, it's kind of free to get into Nicasio. But again, would we build that phase?
Did they look at something like Pine Mountain Tunnel, putting a hole through the mountain instead of?
No, not in this instance.
Because I mean that's one approach,
Yeah.
but you know,
Tunnels work, yeah, and really well when you can kind of balance that pumping energy balance, and of course this is a healthy energy, but our frequency of use, we're hoping anyway,
yeah.
would be less than kind of optimal to support the cost of a tunnel. Again, just summarizing, 2 pump stations almost certainly required for this one. There are no geotech fatal flaws. Again, they're limited area for shoulder, but in this case, more benefit to looking and working in those shoulder areas, and I'll show you that in a moment. It does have similar constructability issues as the others, and this one is really not that feasible. Only that segment to Nicasio would be considered feasible. So you got to build the whole thing from Cotati, somewhere around 23 miles of pipe. So in summary, again, if you were to build out the whole project all the way, including the leg to Nicasio, you're looking at about $190 million in direct costs and a total $320 million or so total construction costs, including those adders. We did, though, this is a longer section and it is through quite a rural area, so we wanted to see if there were ways to shave this cost down. So the team did spend some time looking. I guess I'll hit the summary first, and we'll get into that. So 30 million gallons a day over 4 months is pumping during the winter window, about 11,000 acre-feet of water. The nice thing is we can build this facility to whatever capacity we think we need. It's kind of independent of North Marin and Petaluma and other customers of Sonoma. Significant pipeline distances. It would, though, provide sort of a second aqueduct down to the south, so North Marin would definitely have, some benefit from this. There's
Although you don't show any ties into it
no,
to do that.
at this point, no. There is significant coordination around the Cotati tanks with private landowners and as you get closer to Sulahuli as well. Total cost around $320 million. With a significant...
Anticipating burying the pipeline, I
Yeah.
presume.
Yeah.
So there's not much impact other than they can't build on it.
We'll get back to you. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's essentially the jig on that one. So we wanted to
The
take...
cows aren't going to care.
No. The all of this is as far as we could. That $320 million estimate is in the public right of way as far as we could. We did want to take a look at an overland alignment and what could that achieve for us in terms of reducing cost. So you can see the red parcels there where we're hoping to go sort of cross country. You can see the original alignment sort of dashed yellow. So there's kind of a big, if I could find my mouse, here it is. Right here, there's sort of that, this is the original alignment in the public right-of-way. So we're able to kind of chop off that curve. And overall, it looks like we can reduce the paving costs by about 3 miles. Now, that doesn't sound huge, but, it's $13 million. And then by the time you escalate that $13 million, you're saving $36 million. So you around 10% savings from that 320. So we think we can shave it down to, I don't know, 285 or thereabout $1 million.
Although it might reduce the construction costs enough to make it worthwhile to repave. Because it's easier.
It is easier to go in the road and repave. And so this would take, what I think you're talking about, Director Russell, is that we're going to have to get significant right-of-way permissions and negotiations to do this, and that's going to take time. Yet the construction through those areas, maybe there's an offset there. So we're not really sure if there's really this benefit that we see, or if it's kind of a wash.
I have a question about the shoulder. Is it a limit by right-of-way? Is that what you're referring to?
No,
Or-
just space, really.
But you can widen it.
With right-of-way acquisition, yeah.
I mean, it's nothing you showed in the pictures caught me. I didn't see a granite mountain, half dome type thing, couldn't get through. It looked like you could just push the dirt back and cut the hill that comes down there and, had to put a retaining wall and put a retaining wall. But it looked to me like the shoulder was widenable.
I think in places you're right, yes. I think we just didn't see long kind of continuous miles and miles that would change those costs significantly. Because by the time you start adding in the retaining walls and widening the road and the right-of-way permissions, it probably gets to a wash.
Well, then pushes you back into the paved part.
Correct, yeah. So we just wanted to mention, this is something that we've looked at, and it's interesting at this point. So there are some other design considerations. As you mentioned earlier, we're buying potable water from Sonoma, and we're going to put it in a reservoir.
Even dechlorinating it.
In order to do that, we may need to dechlorinate it, very likely. So that's essentially looks kind of like a building with a chemical tanks and metering pumps, and so there's electric. You're going to need someone to go out there and check on it, take deliveries of chemicals and things like that. Shown here is a sort of little red circle, would be our dotted dashed line is sort of an ideal location to put it because it would capture any potential future pipeline to Nicasio as well, so you don't even need to build the one facility. where we ultimately end up siting it will be likely a matter of practicalities were we to move forward with this option.
What do you gain from not putting it at the pump station?
Oh, you carry that residual through the pipeline.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if it's
Yeah.
pretty well disinfected and no one's using it, you know, it doesn't, if it degrades in quality,
Right.
it's going in an open reservoir, right?
Yep. It's something that we'll be looking at where that goes. This would just be an ideal location. Power, of course, is another limitation for all of these. We've heard me talk about pump stations. Just a high-level analysis. It's tough to get information, as we know from working on Sulahuli out of PG&E. You know, they need definite projects that they want to work on, and you got to know how long you're going to use them for before they give you information. So Carollo is working with a company called Ultig, who is capable of running the CalISO model themselves. And so Ultig are taking a look at it for Carollo on our behalf. And this is kind of a quick summary of where they are after about a week's worth of work with Ultig. It looks like PETA 3 may be the best option, so that's no surprise really going out along San Marin Road, right? There's North Marin's water treatment plants right there by Stafford, so you wouldn't be surprised to learn that there was a decent power availability out that way. This one, it still may require some reconductoring to sort of from single phase to three phase, but it'll be relatively short if that were the case. PETA 4, we're out in the countryside, and again, no surprise to learn that the capacity out there is very limited for the kind of power that we're going to need. And similarly, Cotati 3. The second pump station in particular would be out a fair ways, a number of miles out into the countryside, and the availability of power there is questionable at the moment.
Could we send power back from Sulahuli down the pipeline, down the trench, put a conduit in there and run our own wires back?
Well, if there was power at Sulahuli, we could.
No, but if that's what we're talking about doing, right?
Well, at the moment, it looks like we're able to utilize the existing power set at Sulahuli.
New information.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A lot of moving parts on this stuff. Okay, so that's sort of our quick update, what the team's been up to. With the costs that we currently have, we're looking at that phase 3A and B for PETA 3, right? And that comes in at around 137 million. And then PETA 4, we're looking at that first phase to Sulahuli at about 172 million. And the Cotati 3, we just saw that overland, maybe optimistic route at around 285 million. So that's, we're not building out all the way to Nicosia. We're not building out all of PETA 4. So it's just that first phase of PETA 4. So we're getting 12.5 million gallons a day for PETA 4 and 10.4 for PETA 3. And the Cotati 3 option is still 30 MGD. So the capital cost, fairly straightforward from Carollo, and as Chair Russell was pointing out earlier, the O&M costs, the significant portion of that for us in this pipeline is really the purchase of water. And as we look at today purchasing water from Sonoma, it's about $1,700 an acre foot, and we've got to move that water, and we saw the range of options for pumping, but in all options, it's multiple miles over several hundred feet of elevation, and there's significant costs associated with that. You can see the range here, and these are preliminary. We do need to, I think, of all of these, the energy to pump to Sulahuli is one we need to keep looking at, and I think maybe some tweaks on that one. But a range of around $1,700 to $2,000 an acre foot for pumping. And then we still have to move the water, right? It's in Sulahuli at that point. We need to move the water over to Nicasio, so there's a little bit more money there in energy. And then our standard pumping from Nicasio to through the treatment process at San Geronimo. So this is finished water in the system at San Geronimo, and we're looking at around $4,200 to $4,500.
So even though you don't list it, you're including the cost of treatment.
Yes. You see the pumping from Nicasio and treatment of water at San Geronimo is $540 an acre foot. So significant. That's just to get the water through San Geronimo. And then
It costs
to
us
that,
more than $540 an acre foot to treat the water.
No,
No?
that's where Brett has the numbers for San Geronimo.
Yeah,
at this
I
point.
think the distinction of how much we think, our fully loaded cost to treat the water is
Yeah.
much higher.
Yes.
This is probably a marginal cost.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure we shouldn't have the full cost in there.
You got the treatment plant, you got the operators.
Yeah.
So when we take those capital numbers and express them as present values, this is what they start to look like. That first line, so PETA 3 around 88, PETA 4 around 111, and Cotati around 184 million. And then we do the same with the O&M cost. Now, with the pipeline, it's unique and different from a desalination plant or a recycled water or DPR type facility. We just turn it on when we need it. We don't have to operate it during wet years like we do for a desalination plant. So there's really only the 4-year O&M costs that we have when we actually use it in our theoretical 4-year drought that we're using.
And the thinking would be you just leave the water in the pipeline? I guess it's going in an open reservoir. It probably doesn't matter, but I mean, it's going to not do so well
Yeah,
if it's sit there for 4 years.
I know, right. So we'll need to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I don't know if you bump it and run it a little bit.
Right,
You know,
something.
it's tricky.
Yeah. But for this analysis, we've assumed just those costs over the 4 years, and you can see they're significant, right? And for the reasons it's burdened with that $4,000 to $4,500 per acre foot cost just to purchase the water. So when we look at that over 4 years, it is significant, and you can see kind of the cost per acre foot down there. As we think about, do I have a duplicate slide, or did I go backwards? Went backwards. So when we look at the comparison with the other water supply alternatives, you can see the pipeline alternatives out here, PETA 3, PETA 4, and Cotati 3. Now, different and distinct from, say, the desalination facilities, which have a useful life of 25 years, the pipeline projects have a useful life of 100 years. So we've done...
Especially if you don't use them.
we've treated them to reflect that. So we've given them a salvage credit, right? Because this time we're comparing all of these options on the same planning horizon of 25 years. So if so we've given these pipeline projects and the recycled water for Peacock Gap, for example, that's another pipeline project. It's got a 100-year life nominally, and we've credited that with 75% because this is only a 25-year time horizon. So this is how the cost per acre foot is shaping up as we look at our drought supply projects. And our next steps then would be, we'll finalize that sort of power evaluation, and is that a fatal flaw for the Cotati project, for example? And we're going to continue to work on costs and be back to the board with an update on storage.
Can we go back one slide? The yellow one, which you didn't mention, is the modification of the spillway in
Yes.
Nicasio. I think even a novice can look at these graphs and see a substantial issue. In the IWA meeting, it was quite interesting that California has identified itself as a country. And there were 2 sessions in the meeting about California water issues. Now, I thought that was hilarious because, it's an international group, right, that kind of knows California because of Disneyland, could basically care less about California. But the pitch was our economy is so large that our water needs are so important. And an Australian asked an interesting question, because I'm going to ask you the same question. He said, I hear you. They're talking about the Southern California One Water, 5 major facilities. He said, it's starting to look like desal makes more sense. And I think that's the question to you here. If you're up at $4,500 an acre foot, you're into desal cost per acre foot numbers, maybe $5,000 for treatment. And you see the light blue, I think it's the third one, right, is
Yeah.
desal. looking pretty competitive overall. And his question, which I ask you, is why would you look at anything other than desal under that scenario?
It's an interesting question, and I think we need to see the rest of our alternatives before we can really get into that question. But I think it's a legitimate question and one we'll
Yeah.
need to think about.
Yeah,
There are a number of ways to tackle that question. And
of course, of course. Like I say, though, I mean, his view was very independent. It was based on Australia's decision. Now, Australia's situation is a little different. It's kind of like Las Vegas. The rain is the rain, and if they don't have the rain, the guy said, interestingly enough, about Perth, Australia, he said Perth is assuming 0 rainfall. That's their model. So I don't know what that's based on. Perth is situated about where San Diego is in the United States, if you think about it that way. It's flat, coastal environment, has surface water storage, but they're not anticipating using it because they're not anticipating having any. So, it amazes me that I'm even saying these words, okay, based on 2004. But things are moving around. And like I say, I thought the Australian was right on with this question.
Director Russell, to share that as staff has looked at this, kind of a similar conclusion in that it feels like desal will probably move from kind of a secondary position to really, as we bring, in the coming months to the board, discussions on preferred project selection, that desal will need to be an important part of that conversation and deliberations.
Yeah, I'm not so sure your 25 years is right either. I don't know what component you think is going to wear out in a desal, but I know the Israelis, which a plant I worked on, aren't anticipating 25 years. So, I mean, pumps, yes, membranes, yes, but the pressure vessels, the structure, building, they're going to last longer than that. So I think we might need to look at that harder. Any questions, Matt?
I have 2 questions. One, the cost you estimate to get water from Suluhuli to Nicasio, the pumping cost, does that include potential upgrades that we're looking at right now in terms of dedicated pipe?
no,
At the current cost right now?
No, the pipe's not included in
It's
that.
energy.
It's just most
Just
energy. Yeah.
So we wouldn't see too much of a change if we get some improvements out there.
No,
Okay.
because we would be planning to make those improvements anyway, so that we're not burdening the project with those costs.
Gotcha. And then with the pipe diameter where we're looking at I'm sorry, I keep getting these back, PETA 4.
Yeah.
When it comes off of the Petaluma area, what size is that North Marin Aqueduct? Is it it's much bigger diameter than what we're seeing down in Novato?
Yeah, that's correct, Director Sampson. It's 42-inch diameter up there,
Okay.
which is why we're able to.
Was that north of where the
Yes.
deflection happened last year?
Yes.
Okay. Good. That was it. Thank you.
Paul, I thought part of the question was, right, we're going to put in piping from Suluhuli to Nicasio,
Yes.
right? So isn't it, assuming we do that, it will be a question whether or not we'll need the branch directly to Nicasio?
Or if there's a cost savings to branch it direct to Nicasio as opposed to put it to Suluhuli and then Suluhuli to Nicasio.
Correct. Those decisions, we're not quite at the point whether we want to make those yet. And you're going to see us continue to keep that, for example, Nicasio leg in there as part of the overall project description. Were we to, the different options we're looking at, it could make sense to have that Nicasio option included in our CEQA project description. It's not necessarily that we would build it, but we want to keep that thought process kind of going.
Thanks. I think it's exciting. Especially, I like the one with the parallel aqueduct because I think that provides a lot more than the others in terms of system reliability. But the costs are breathtaking. So I don't know where we're going on that part. Public comment?
Yes, we have several. Jack and then Phil Sauter, please.
I was wondering whether it's been discussed how much of the Russian River water project would be paid for by Northern Marin Water District versus Marin Water.
Go ahead.
Has that,
I can provide an answer, Chair Russell, if you'd like me to indulge the question.
Sure.
It's very preliminary days yet, so North Marin are open to partnering with us, but that's about as far as we've got. So the benefits have not been directly established for North Marin.
I'm most notably just pointing this out because if they're getting part of the water, which that map made pretty clear, they should be paying for part of this project.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, I don't think they'll see it that way, Jack.
Mr. Phil Sauter? And then Ed Jameson.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. I always go back to Director Russell's eyes opening, seeing $300 million numbers floating around. I think it's about $5,000 per hookup if you allocate it among all of us customers. I will say that I'd rather be drinking this water than desal water or some of the other toilet to tap alternatives that we might be looking at. I think the quality of this water would be good. But I am really reminded every time I think about bringing in 10 million gallons of potable water, I believe that's about how much potable water we use for non-potable purposes. And I keep thinking we're going to bring it down, we're going to treat it, we're going to store it, and then we're going to use it on our lawns. And I keep scratching my head thinking, why would we want to go to all of those machinations to get potable water for non-potable water use? And then I think about what would $300 million buy if we ever wanted to convert some of our outdoor water use or lower it. What could we afford in terms of a conservation program that would get people to transition their landscaping more to a Mediterranean landscape? And what could we buy in terms of a purple pipe system? I know we say purple pipe is way too expensive, but if you threw $300 million at it, would it, what would that look like? So I just keep trying to make sense of why we're bringing in more potable water when we've only got a 2-year supply, and a lot of that goes to outdoor use. So I'm still trying to get my head around it, and I'll keep attending meetings until it makes sense. Thank you.
The Romans had the same problem,
Yeah.
and we've followed the Roman path.
Look what happened to that.
Exactly.
Chair Russell, it is interesting, as we think about purple pipe, we look at our current cost per mile to put in potable, and it's went from $1 million a mile to $2 million a mile. Now fully loaded is probably approaching 3 or getting in that vicinity. So we have about 900 miles of potable piping. So you think about a system of purple pipe, you do the math, where you move from millions to billions pretty quickly. So the cost of putting in infrastructure in that sort of way is very challenging.
And the inconvenience.
Absolutely.
When I first joined the board, I asked that question, why only one area is plumbed? And the answer that I recall, which could be incorrect, but the answer I recall is that San Rafael dug their feet in and said, we don't want you digging up our streets anymore to put in purple pipe. That's what I remember the answer being. So whether that's still true or not, I don't know. But my guess is it's true because the pipe ends right in the middle of San Rafael. It's a practical problem.
We have several more speakers.
Okay.
Mr. Ed Jameson, Barbara Reedy, and Larry Minikis. Go ahead, Mr. Jameson.
Yes, thanks. The key question for the conveyance alternatives is how much winter water can we count on from the Russian River in a prolonged drought? There's no actual experience to answer this question, and I believe it represents an unresolvable uncertainty upon which our security ultimately depends. Desal, on the other hand, can be turned on with certainty when needed, apparently at about the same theoretical cost. More on that later. The PETA 3 alternative offers only about 3,800 acre-feet per year, almost inconsequential compared to our need of at least 12 or 13,000 acre-feet per year. The two Cotati 3 alternatives at about 300 million and PETA 4 at 342 million could provide a meaningful supply of 11,000 acre-feet per year. For comparability to other supply alternatives, it appears that the acre-foot cost calculations may include only 25 years of capital costs for these 100-year assets, but all 100 years of these bonding costs would have to be paid for by ratepayers over the next 30 years. So the costs of these conveyance alternatives may be hugely understated for us ratepayers who will be paying for the pipeline's full 100-year life over just the next 30 years. Finally, the assumed so-called salvage credit for capital costs after 25 years should be reviewed for analytical reasonableness. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barbara Reedy. Okay, Mr. Larry Minikis, please.
Well, good morning, and Paul, thank you for yet another interesting presentation. There's a couple things. One with desal. We've had this discussion before, and one of the major challenges is there's almost no one that we're aware of that is using bay water or river water for desal, and so that will come with significant environmental challenges that we have to consider as we go forward. Again, coming back to desal and looking more deeply at it. And then with the phase construction costs, what would be helpful for the public to see is with phase A, phase B, and phase C, what we're talking about in terms of timeline. And that also goes to the estimated construction costs. How would construction costs be phased over time so we can get a better idea of how long this will take? And with that, because we know it'll take several years, we'll need a contingency should we go into another drought or another serious drought in the next couple of years. And what will that contingency look like? Are we just going to tell people to cut water? Are we going to have some sort of emergency plan, some sort of early warning so that should this happen again, we can move more quickly on it? And those are my comments this morning. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Ms. Barbara Reedy.
I apologize. There's been a mistake. I was not intending to speak today, but since I am speaking, simply say this conveyance project is just another additional cost. If you decide that you think Sulehule is the dam to raise, this just adds another layer of cost. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. Well, interesting conversation. One of many, I think, that's coming. These are thorny issues, to say the least. LA, in their presentation, pushed back on the desal issue with a statement, I don't know if it's true or not, but they said that they felt the permitting challenge of a large-scale desal was unsurmountable. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that was their position. They were also asked by the same Australian the same question, 2 different sessions, but the same question came up. And so I don't know. They, referenced Carlsbad, and Carlsbad had a series of events, but it got done. So I don't know. I don't know if that's something that we need to look at, though. I could track back to the person who made that statement and put us in contact with that person. They may have information we're not aware of. They were roughly referencing the Coastal Commission. It's kind of what they were talking about. Didn't quite say that, but it was talking about the problems of brine disposal. That was the driving force. So I don't know. But we probably better tie that down if we're thinking about any kind of alternative like that. I agree with that, Jameson. It is seductive, the idea that you can turn it on and turn it off, even though it's not quite that simple, desal. But something we're going to think about. Okay. With that, our next meeting is September 20th. And I will adjourn the meeting.